this might be a long one. As a disclaimer, I don't hate Blazblue. Blazblue was the first fighting game I really put myself into, and it was the game I found competitive drive in. We should be willing to be critical of anything, especially that which is close to us. I'm more disappointed by the series, but I don't hate it. This topic also applies to other really easy games like Granblue Vs, BB Tag, Strive, etc. So, to the point, Blazblue is one of the worst fighting games to learn first, if not the worst. This isn't because I have issues with what the game is at a competitive level or a distaste for a mechanic or whatever. The game's entire learning curve is destroyed by how easy the game is in relation to the achievable rewards, and the player base's perception of what they need to do to compete being shaped by players of middling skill and understanding of the game and the genre. There's a bit to unpack here. Let's start with what I meant by the game being easy. The majority of people who are introduced to fighting games for the first time will have trouble with chaining attacks together, special cancels, let alone being able to perform special inputs in the first place. Trying to learn new muscle memory is time-consuming, different, but not necessarily difficult. I doubt anyone who passed the initial hurdle into becoming a fighting game player will consider a fireball motion difficult. What I'm talking about is after you pass the initial point of whether you have the desire to commit yourself or not, whether you develop competitive desire or not. Not necessarily the urge to try hard and go to tournaments, but more so just to be able to perform against one's peers. Timing and speed can be measured by difficulty, and that's what I think of when I say Blazblue is easy. These things aren't nearly as present as people might think they are within the game. I just did a video explaining why Naoto is easy, but to explain why he made a stir on his release, he was honestly the first character to have notable and multiple instances where your timing, finger agility, and dexterity, and how accurate you could do inputs mattered outside of a high-level play, where every character has at least one thing that can be considered somewhat difficult. However, we don't start at a high-level play. The road to that destination should be long and arduous, but it isn't in Blazblue. The destination isn't far away, but instead of a road you have more of a field to roll around in until you find the right place. Other players will prey upon you if you're new or a low-level player no matter which game you play. Having a clear route to your destination allows you to focus on one step at a time, whereas being lost with no direction can eventually lead you to circling around since you don't even know which direction to take a step in. This is what a learning curve might look like, or a shitty MS Paint representation of it. Given enough desire and drive, you could learn things that could be considered later on for the learning curve. Techniques or concepts advanced for your skill level. This isn't common in games with healthy learning curves, but it isn't harmful for your development in those cases due to already needing an understanding of the fundamentals to be able to grasp the advanced techniques in the first place. This also compounds with players normally sticking with what they already know and adding on to that bit by bit through practice or play. Games like Street Fighter and Guilty Gear require players to actually know how to fight before they can make any real improvements in their wisdom and performance. There isn't much filler to learn, or time to learn it, when the main concern is trying not to be hit out of everything in neutral and then ran over by your opponents. In Blazblue's case, the curve looks more like this. Compared to a typical curve, there isn't much of a climb at all. Not until the end, at least. You can consider a normal curve to be sort of like a staircase, where you have to go up one step at a time. Sure, some people are tall, and some people have strong legs, but that means they're either born for it or trained with something else to be able to excel here. On Blazblue's curve, you have the initial hurdle everyone has when it comes to having fighting games click with them, like how you suddenly realize something has vastly more depth and layers of expertise, and you've just scratched the surface. Your confidence drops significantly and only drops further until you're truly on the climb to mastery. It's a shame people take these feelings out on others within the player base, but that's a topic for later in the video. Due to the lack of clear direction despite having goals, Blazblue players will end up brute forcing learning how to fight purely off of playing without any real theory to it. It's a long time before someone decides the value of learning frame data outweighs the intimidation of learning something new. Something that isn't just hitting buttons and hoping you learn by exposure with no foundation or tools to learn with. All the while, they see quite a few of their opponents doing long combos and high damage. Surely learning your real damage combo routes will make the difference. And that's it. The common first step Blazblue players take. The common point where they quit the game or their character for something easier, or continue on in limp mediocrity, unable to make meaningful progress since they aren't given much time to learn what they're doing wrong in matches. They can't make progress with combos due to inability, and they can't make progress of fighting or tech in general because they don't understand the reasoning behind the applications of techniques, or have the fundamentals to be able to work off of. Anyway, the main point is that for Blazblue, you're able to take things, just combos and setups, from later on in the learning curve due to how low-hanging it is for the average player. Being able to perform is made accessible, but the theory and strategy isn't. The result of this is theory and strategy are actually pushed further ahead due to performance taking up more time and thus a distraction. The value people place on performance is also higher, and the other subjects conversely are lower. To top it all off, players who progress like this eventually have the impression that their understanding of theory and strategy is fine enough purely due to experience, and rarely take the time to actually focus on either. When trolling forums and witnessing this behavior from players I've talked with or heard from over the past 11 years since Blazblue's release, one thing I could say for absolute certain is that none of them are given proper perspective of what they need to be doing. Need. A word that I've spied or heard countless times when someone of middling skill and understanding, a soul lost on their journey on this game, decides to give advice to another lost player. Sometimes it's advice for unsuspecting beginners that don't know any better. They'll be told that whatever issue they're having trouble with is necessary for functional performance, that they need to be able to, say, microdash, or they'll lag behind everyone else due to their inability to perform. Everyone else is on that train to High Damageville, and you better be boarding, or you're just stuck there forever with no other way to improve. Honestly, this is ridiculous. The very notion is completely ridiculous. People drop characters over this. People drop games over this. People grow depressed and disinterested with the game or genre because of this. This behavior is, albeit indirectly, a type of gatekeeping through expectations set through peer pressure. There's no emphasis on learning how to do things yourself either. I've watched Brian and Sagejam plenty of times with people begging in the chat to be shown how to do what they're doing with chat's character despite it being a fundamental concept they can figure out themselves in under 5 minutes. Of course they tell their chat this, but it doesn't seem like hardly any of them are paying attention, or interested in doing anything themselves. Difficult games, and games that emphasize learning the ground level play, keep you focused. If a technique is too difficult for you, you set it aside for later and look at what you can do. The next step you are lined up to take will usually be something just out of reach until you're adept or wise enough. The time and energy spent on working on something of great challenge is better spent making small improvements on everything and gradually refining yourself. Difficulty shapes and narrows your path. Difficulty gives you direction, or at least allows you to more easily find it on your own. Difficulty encourages looking inward instead of outward. Difficulty encourages creative thinking. A player that grows like this can take what they've learned and the learning process itself to new games and new characters, expediting the process. A player that learns fresh from a game like Blazblue requires sheer luck, an incredible amount of time, and strong natural talent to really make it anywhere in the genre without a guiding hand. The sad reality is that while fighting games are for anyone, they are not for everyone. Designing for ease of access for low and mid-level players not only harms the game competitively, it hurts its player base. This is either done by developers who don't know any better, or are trying to make a quick cash grab off of an IP without caring about said IP or the health of its long-term player base. The former is a display of incompetence, and the latter is malicious. Should fighting game players still humor this type of thing because it's something new to play? If our standards are higher, the new players will migrate to the stronger games, and developers will be forced to get their act together. It's just a thought.